Hey everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. So I have a copy of Crusaders Divine Influence. It's an expansion for Crusaders that will be done. As you can see, this one has a TMG logo on the box, but Renegade Games is the new publisher and is finishing up the TMG stock so it doesn't just throw them in the trash. But the game is now published by Renegade Games. So what does this expansion add to the base game? So here we go. Each player will take an added player board extension with 4 of each new type of buildings. Yes, these new buildings are cardboard tiles instead of the wood buildings. So you have 4 new buildings, some new Knight Order tiles, 2 troop tiles per player, 16 coat of arm tokens per player, 2 new majority bonus tiles, new influence tiles, more action markers, and more of the 25-point influence tokens, and new enemy tracks. Wow. So players have a lot more on their player board, and the actions from the rondel, they all become more advanced and in turn increases in complexity for this game in general. The game is played the same way as the base game, except for some changes to the influence, the travel, and the build actions, and because of those changes, scoring will change a bit as well. So first, let me talk about the influence action, which was super straightforward in the base game. Well, it's now changed. You will add up your influence value from your action markers, plus any bonuses from your churches, your farms, your banks, or influence tiles themselves. And then you can collect an influence tile costing less from a region on the board occupied by one of your knights. These are one of these tokens here. Influence tiles can do different things. 12 of them give immediate effects like upgrading a rondel tile or distributing your tokens again. 24 of them give a one-time effect where you can use it to add to the strength of an indicated action. Those tiles are then flipped over once they're used. 5 of them have a permanent effect where they add 1 bonus to the action of the indicated type for the rest of the game. And 2 of them have an in-game bonus award at the end of the game. For each influence tile that you have collected throughout the game, you gain 1 additional influence. You can also do this influence action in a region now with an enemy token that is on where you're at. You will then collect influence points equal to the level of the influence tile that you just collected, which will be 1, 2, 3, or 4. Lastly, you will place your coat of arms marker in the region to represent your influence there, as you can now travel through that region easier, which I will explain next, as the travel action. So the travel action is the same, except when you leave a region that has your own coat of arms marker in it, it costs 1 less movement point than normal. So that would be 1 movement point still if an enemy is present there, or 0 movement points if no enemy is there and you have your influence coat of arm shield marker there. And now the biggest addition that changes the game a bit is the build action. You can now build a wider variety of buildings to gain different benefits. The cost of these new buildings are 5 for level 1, 6 for level 2, 7 for level 3, and 8 for a level 4 of each type. But in addition, these new buildings can be built in the same region as a specific other building shown on the board. And if you do that, the cost is lowered to 3, 4, 5, and 6. So a keep can go on a location that has a castle, a chapel can go on there where there's a church, a mill can go where there is a farm, and a vault can go where there is a bank. There are no build bonus tiles that apply to the new buildings. Buildings still cannot be erected in a region with an enemy token that is present there. Each region can only contain 1 building except for that exception that I already talked about. And then the same as the base game, you will collect your influence points equal to the level of the building that was built. 1, 2, 3, or 4 influence. So what do these new buildings do? That's a good question. Well, keeps. Well, when a keep is built, you will be able to muster a troop by flipping the leftmost tile over. You don't gain influence for flipping it over, as you score the new building and not the troop. The first 3 keeps add troops, and the 4th one awards 1 influence for each troop that you have face up. Chapels. So you will continue your turn and move your action tokens as normal. And then for the first 3 chapels added, you will add an additional action marker from the supply and add it to the action wedge that you use that turn. The level 4 chapel scores 2 points for each action wedge with a 2 or more action tokens on it at that time. Mills. So mills will let you remove any eligible building from your player board, even if the previous building of that type is still present. So the first mill lets you remove any level 1 building. The second one lets you remove any level 1 or 2 buildings. And the third one lets you remove any level 1, 2, or 3 buildings. And the last one lets you remove any building at all except for the level 4 bank. So even if you don't add any chapels during the game to the board, you can do this to remove the level 4 chapel, and at this point you will get influence points that you would never have access to by taking that off. Vaults. So when building one of the first 3 vaults, you may immediately flip an action wedge to the upgraded side. Action tokens will stay in the same places where they were at, and in addition, at the end of the game, you will score the number of points shown on these spaces. The last space, the level 4 vault, will give you 1 influence for each upgraded action wedge on your board. So then you will play through the game with those changes, and at the end of the game there is a new majority bonus in addition to the enemy type bonuses. Now there is a 5-point influence majority tile that is awarded to the player with the most total influence tiles in their play area. And then the second most will get the 2-point bonus tile. So in the expansion, you will then follow the in-game scoring, but you will also add in some new in-game scoring stuff, like the person that got one of the 7-point influence tiles. They are awarded influence for each influence tiles that they have. You will also add up your points from level 1 to 3 vaults, plus the points from all of your level 4 buildings, including the new ones. The player then with the most influence points is the winner and has shown substantial leadership and brings huge influence to their order of knights. And well, that's Crusaders' Divine Influence. So this expansion definitely adds to the complexity of this game, which I think many, if not most people, would really like. The most noticeable changes that I notice is that players are intercepting each other more than the base game. There's more player interaction, and when this happens, there is more fun. Most people want and like this change, I think. The interaction still isn't aggressive, but becomes more of that sneaky type thing where a player does a certain thing, then that opens up something that other players can do after. And certain buildings also become more important because the new buildings can only go on certain spaces that have that similar building type to place on it. And so players, are looking for other players to give them that access to it. This expansion developed the influence action a bit more, and it makes it more strategic rather than just gaining points. Now, it gives you points, but also helps you with your movement by adding the shield onto that location as well. All of the changes to the actions really just let players have more options and let them build up in a different path how they would like to. They get to choose their path. Now, since there is more to do, players don't do everything. So players will need to choose a focus, or else they just will be average in everything, and most likely they won't win the game that way. So you got to find your path. All my thoughts of the basic game still apply when playing this expansion, but the expansion just widens things a bit and lets players make more of those crucial decisions. Are you going to go build a keep where another player has a castle? Or will you march on and crusade to gain those points? But maybe another player comes in to build behind you as well. There are way more tactical decisions to be made with this expansion. And movement now becomes easier to get where you want to be on the board, and you have to, in addition, spend more time by influencing places and placing your shield there to take advantage of free movement spaces as well. But it'll benefit you by taking those free movement actions a lot. The new Night Order tiles aren't game changers in the expansion. They just kind of connect with the new additions a bit more, but buildings become even more important, and which buildings that you can build and which ones that you get to level 4 to take advantage of those extra influence points at the end of the game becomes a little more of a bigger deal. So if the base game was not complex enough for you, then try this expansion. If you want more player interaction in a game, then try this expansion. And if you just want to try something different with the same great game that you love, then try this expansion. So build, travel, and crusade with your family and friends in Crusaders Divine Influence by Renegade Games.
Again, this is Boardgame Brody, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.
Oh man, I think I picked the perfect shirt for this game. Look at that.